Welcome. Welcome to this edition of Go Vote Omaha, presented by the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. I'm Jan McKenzie, League of Women Voters Greater Omaha President, and the host for today's program. Today we are talking with Rachel Gibson from the League of Women Voters of Nebraska about what has happened in the 2025 Unicameral session and what it means for Nebraskans. Rachel serves as Vice President of Action for League of Women Voters of Nebraska. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse candidates or parties. The League does, however, take positions on issues. Our purpose is to empower voters and defend democracy. Welcome, Rachel, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm always happy to share all the knowledge about the legislature in my mind.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to hearing more about this last few months of the legislature. So can you start by telling us about how the legislature works in Nebraska and the roles Nebraskans have in policymaking?
Nebraska has a really unique legislature. I love it. We are the only legislature in the country that only has one legislating body. So the legislative branch, the branch that makes the laws, nationally and in most states, you have like your House and your Senate. But here in Nebraska, we have what's called a Unicameral, which just means the one house that we refer to as the legislature or the Unicameral. When this was created, it was created so that things were easier to follow. It really moved policy along, and people asked, well, what are you going to do to have the checks and balances? And the answer was the people. So the people were built into the process as far as, you know, speaking at hearings or giving their perspective, and they're often referred to as the second house. So we have a really unique opportunity in Nebraska to be engaged in a way that we are literally built into the structure of our government.
And so how does the League interact with the legislature this year?
So the League kept doing what they've done for decades at this point, which is we follow what legislation gets introduced. So there were over 800 pieces of legislation this year. We look at all of those, we categorize them because we have a great group of volunteers and 6 different action teams that have different focuses. And each action team looks at theirs in their area and chooses ones that they either want to write in support of or in opposition to. Then they do research, write those position statements, and we either submit those online on behalf of the League, or we'll go down and actually testify at the legislature. So this year we had 43 positions written, which is pretty impressive for a small but mighty group of volunteers.
Is that pretty much average, or was it more this year?
It's pretty much average. We had a kind of an odd spike in 2020 because people were home and could write. So that was 60. So we're in the right range. We're in the right range.
And what wins did the League celebrate this year?
Yes, wins and losses for the legislature. It's hard to talk about it in those terms because there's just so many different moving pieces. So I'll speak more broadly about some themes and things like that. One win that we had was getting people involved. So this year we saw a lot more folks sign up for our action alerts. We saw more events where somebody would be like, hey, I brought my friend. And just getting people involved and really tapping into what's already existing out there that people are curious and they want to know how to get involved. So that's one really great thing that we saw, was that increase. Very specifically, we saw LB3, which was the very politically motivated bill that would have changed how Nebraska allots our electoral votes for president. That has become nationally, attention has been drawn to it the past few years. And we really appreciated that through coalition work and getting people motivated to talk to their senators, we had just the right number of senators to say, you know, that's the way we've been doing it works for decades. Why are we doing it now? So that's changing it now. So we were able to stop that bill from moving forward. Another piece of legislation that's again, it's hard to call it really a win, but there a bill called the Stand With Women Act. When that was originally introduced, that had two portions. One was related to kids playing on sports teams in schools that aligned with their gender identity. The other was restricting people's access to bathrooms in state buildings. Ultimately, they took off that second piece, and so the bill did ultimately pass, but it was just that first piece, which is the sports bill, which again is not a good bill, but the really catastrophic piece of that was able to be removed through conversations with their senators about this is what this actually means.
So considering that we're finishing up the first of a 2-year cycle with the legislature, will some of these items come back?
Yes.
In 2026?
Yes, they definitely will. And even if it was a new legislature, they might come back. There's no rule that you can't reintroduce something. So because of the way our legislature's structured, is they're in 2 years, as you mentioned. So the first year, the long session, is 90 days, and that's when we introduce our budget and first batch of bills. Whatever's not moved forward or totally voted down or passed carries over to the next year. So they don't need to reintroduce those bills. They just exist where they are in the process starting in January. They also can introduce new bills. So I anticipate, in addition to the ones that are just going to basically reappear where they were this session, we'll see several more bills that are very similar that get introduced in January as well.
Okay. So many Nebraskans were concerned about bills introduced that were contradictory to the ballot initiatives that were passed by the people of Nebraska in November of 2024. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about these bills and where they ended up? I know you've already alluded to a little bit to some, but can you share more kind of the details and where we're at?
Yeah, so this is a tricky one because not all states have a ballot initiative process. So because we're very people-oriented in the way we structure our government, we have the ability to do direct democracy, which is to gather enough signatures to put something on the ballot and vote on it. And Nebraskans use that tool a lot. So what we saw this year was that there are 4 in particular that come to mind, policies that people spoke pretty clearly on at the ballot box, that then the legislature was adjusting quite a bit. And the tricky piece here is that the adjustment is not unusual because you have to make it workable, right? Mm-hmm. You only can put so many words on the ballot. What was concerning was the extent to which our senators were adjusting things to the point that it was undercutting the purpose of the actual ballot initiative. So, for example, one of the bills was about minimum wage. And so it was creating what was moved forward through the legislature was creating different subsets of people who were exempt from that. Another was earned paid sick leave. And similarly, it was looking at, are there certain age groups or are there certain things where you don't need to provide that? Those two, one of them passed, so the paid sick leave did pass, which restricts slightly the ability for people to access that. And more importantly, they stripped out the piece that would allow people to take an employer legally if they had been denied their leave or it had been misused, which was literally in the ballot initiative. So that one did pass. The minimum wage that was changing the rules around that got stalled at the final stage. We know it's coming back next year. It'll probably come back early next year, so that's an ongoing conversation. The other two are kind of unusual because one is medical cannabis. And so, as you know, the people in Nebraska passed overwhelmingly medical cannabis. And the way the legislation was written actually asked the legislature to make more rules, and that is the one that they didn't move forward. So there were lots of stall tactics from folks who weren't supportive of medical cannabis or medical marijuana. So they didn't pass anything, and now we're kind of trying to figure out how to implement what the people passed with no guidance. And then the last one is we didn't see anything move forward on this, but very concerning because the conversation about public dollars in private schools has been going on for years. There have been 2 different successful ballot initiatives to repeal a bill that basically gave a benefit, a public benefit to private schools. The second one actually made it all the way, and we voted on it, and Nebraskans said no thank you, and literally the same bill was introduced again, in addition to 2 others that did kind of the same thing. So the pattern here is, yes, the legislature needs to be able to make something workable, but the length to which folks are going is beyond what I think most people would say, and in some cases directly against, for example, that last one we were talking about with school dollars.
Especially when the numbers on the voting was very clear.
Yes.
With that.
And there was one initiative that in all but 2 districts, constituents voted more for that issue than the person who was elected. So that's
pretty passionate issue, obviously.
Yeah.
So the state budget was a large issue for both politicians and citizens in the state. What was the discussion, and where did the state end up in addressing this deficit, or the perceived deficit issue, before they had the balanced budget?
So you've hit on the 2 things that have stressed me out the most from this session, is the rolling back of voters' ballot initiatives and the budget. The budget is, we are in a really dangerous place, frankly, with our state budget. A few years ago, the state budget was in a really solid place. And at that point, some senators decided to pass an income tax cut. At the time, there were several entities that were saying, run the numbers, this is going to be a problem in a few years. And lo and behold, it is now a problem. Mm-hmm. So throughout this year, we repeatedly heard the Economic Forecasting Board saying, oh, we're actually getting less revenue than we thought, even less than we thought, even less than we thought. So we already were not starting in a great place, and then they had to keep reducing the budget because we're required to have a balanced budget in Nebraska. Ultimately, we got to a place that we were using some techniques that were usually used when you're in an economic crisis. So for example, tapping into dedicated funds for other things. So an organization, part of the government might have been saving money to do a big project. On paper, it looks like they have money, so they went in and swept that money out. That wasn't true for all of them, but for many it was. So cleaning out those funds, we dipped into our state savings account pretty significantly so that it would appear that we had a balanced budget. And then there were also some tools they used that are very unusual, such as like setting farther implementation dates on things that cost money, so that it looks on paper that doesn't cost, but it's going to. One thing that they would not entertain was pausing or slowing down the income tax rates. So when they cut them, it was a stair step. We're in the middle of that. We're still going to cut them more. And there just did not seem the political will to pause those till we were in a more stable fiscal position. I can't reiterate this enough, that it's very serious and it was self-inflicted and avoidable. We're going to be in a really interesting area because of what the federal government recently changed. So all of this is before we even had the big, beautiful bill budget that came out. And now there's going to be even more pressure put on our state to fill in some of those services that the federal government is taking the money away from funding for. So not a great place. Not a great place.
Very challenging.
Yeah.
So we have a budget, a balanced budget. Will there be any changes to it in the next legislative session? I mean, is there opportunity for that, or?
Yes, and I think that we actually, there was conversation towards the end of session about potentially having to have a special session, which is something that gets called outside of our regular spring session. Those happen occasionally, but they're usually because of something time sensitive. When we can't pay our bills, that would be time sensitive. So there's already some speculation, again, removed to the federal government, that we might get to a point that we need to readjust our budget even before next session, particularly with what the federal government has now passed. I think it's very possible that we'll actually see our senators having to go back to Lincoln before January and figure out how we're going to pay our bills and still provide services for folks.
And to your knowledge, have we been this strained before?
That's a great question, and I can't speak to the very specifics, but broadly, in talking with other folks who live in this area, 2008 was definitely a place where we had to sit down and look at where we were at. 2020, initially, there was a lot of consternation about the budget, but there was federal funding that came in that kind of covered that gap.
Sure.
So, and that's part of what made our future look so bright, and then that money stopped coming in. And
It's a
now we need to
short-term
make an
win.
adjustment. Exactly.
Can you explain about the interim studies that are done and which ones the league is involved with or closely monitoring?
Interim studies are what happens in between sessions. So, like I said, I'm not there. Our senators, our 49 senators, meet down in the Capitol in the spring to actually make legislation. They can't make law when they're not in session. Interim studies give them the opportunity to do something in between. So a lot of our senators use this as time to research so they can hit the ground running in January with a bill that they know is supported and going to work and that sort of thing. These run the gamut. So some of these are really involved studies that are, doing site visits to nursing homes to assess like elder care across the state, or analysis of different tax codes in other states. Some of them are more of an indicator of, hey, I'm looking at this, even if there's not super formal steps that are taken. So it runs the gamut. These are available to see what they are on the legislature's website, and I would encourage people to go look. If there's something that interests them, email the senator who introduced it, because for most interim studies, they really are trying to get their arms around an issue in the state so that they can produce the best possible policy. So if folks are interested in something or it would affect them, they should definitely reach out to that legislature. So.
And how can Nebraskans support or influence policy outside of the state legislative session, thinking around local politics, the school boards?
Yeah, there's lots of ways, which is almost the challenge, right? Because it's like,
Almost
where
too
do
many.
I aim? Yeah,
Where do you start?
Exactly. So I think a really good place to start is find an issue that you're really passionate about. And if you're able to identify that, go to the people who are in that area, whether it's an advocacy group or a nonprofit or a volunteer organization. They know where the effort is needed. So if, let's say that you're, interested in the food bank, and feeding folks. The Food Bank of the Heartland, they have a group that works on policy. They have a group who can say, hey, this is the thing that's happening at the city. We need people to go give comment or that type of thing. So I think a good place to kind of make it feel a little more manageable is to start with an issue that is important to you and go to that advocacy group and kind of see where you can fit in.
And you mentioned earlier, too, about the different action groups, the teams, and the research. Can you elaborate on kind of which teams there are? You mentioned several, but
yeah. This is like a quiz. Let's see if I can do all six of them. Okay. Yeah. So the league is also a great. I'm selling everything but our league. The league is also a great place to go. And particularly helpful for folks who just don't know where to start. We're
Absolutely.
a great place to start for that. And
we love those questions, by the way.
Yes. Even if you don't know what the organization is, send me an email and I'll say, hey, look at these. But for our volunteers with our action groups, we have 6 different areas. Let's see if I can do this. Education, government, social policy, natural resourse, health, and disability and behavioral health.
Excellent.
Oh, I got them. Yes. Okay. They'll keep me.
Of course.
So we have those 6 different action groups. And what I love about those is the people who make up those groups, like I said, are volunteers. And many of them are folks who work in the area or have someone infected, or we have a fair amount of retired folks that have expertise to really dig in. So like I said, what those groups do is when we have legislation come out, they are able to really dig in and say, water policy is a great example. Hard for me to follow, not my jam. Our former director in that area spent her whole life working in water conservation.
Can't beat that.
So she was able to say, like, this is something we need to be worried about, or this is a really good idea. So those groups actually then dig in and, like I said, write a letter or go testify at the Capitol. Great way, if folks are unsure of how they want to get involved, to just learn the process. Because it's one great thing about the league is it's as little or as much as you'd like it to be. So even just going to those meetings and hearing the conversations that are being had and learning about how the system works, that's a great way to kind of wet your feet a little bit.
And I certainly think about the legislators too, because then you get to know what are their passion bills are too, and match up and have an opportunity to get engaged with them. Yeah,
and we, again, because of the way our legislature is structured, our legislators, most of them are pretty open to people chatting. We'll have events that we're able to actually meet and talk with legislators, and that's a really great experience too, to just really see that these are our neighbors who are serving, and they need our input.
When you speak about the events, League is well known for having our legislative day once a year down at the Capitol. But we also did a new event, Rachel, that you kicked off and led efforts.
Yes.
You want to share a little bit about what happened and how that came together, and then where do you see that going in the future?
Yeah. Yes. Thanks. That was another win. I should have thought of that as well. So we have our regular legislative day that has been going on for years and years and years, which is a great, fantastic day. Usually it's league members and it's very structured. This year, in all of those conversations about the ballot initiative bills, not only was the policy kind of poking at what the voters had passed, but some of the language of a handful of our senators was not kind to the voters about if we knew what we voted on, or things about how much money is coming into the state to push things and that nothing's grassroots. And there's an element of truth to that, but there's also a lot of Nebraskans who worked on those issues and voted on them. And so in listening to debate, I finally got frustrated and said, well, we just need to get down there so you can see me and I can tell you, hi, I'm the Nebraskan who worked on that.
Absolutely.
on that ballot initiative. So it was really incredible. We have an amazing group of nonprofits and advocacy groups that work in different areas across the state, kind of pitched this idea, and everybody said, sure, what do you need from me? And so in less than a space of a month, we had set up a day that anyone could pop in whenever they wanted. So it was open house style. We were there from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Our lovely advocacy friends donated volunteers to help guide people through the process. And it really was just folks could come whenever they wanted. They could watch debate just to see what they looked like. They could say, I want to talk to my senator. And we'd have someone walk with them through that process. And it was a really lovely day. We had over 60 individuals show up. 23 different districts were represented. And we got a lot of comments like, oh, I haven't been here since 4th grade. When I laid down in the circle and looked up at the ceiling, which is, I love that common shared experience for Nebraskans. But there was a lot of encouragement that this made it more accessible and less scary. And so I think it's probably something that we're going to continue to do, and next year will be even better because we will have more than a month to plan, because I will have planned it earlier than a month.
Well, it was a great event, and I even heard from people that after the fact, they're like, we missed it, but let me know when next year's. So people are definitely looking forward to it. I think people know how important the people's voice is as with the legislature, and just staying involved and such.
And I hear a lot from folks about feeling like they're not being heard or powerless, removed of the ballot initiative things, just that their voice doesn't really make a difference. And a lot of times that then spurs inaction. And I think that the solve is actually more action. Even if your legislator, no matter what level, disagrees with you, you still have a right to tell them what you think. So keep emailing, keep calling. It does actually make a difference, and include witnesses when you need to. So CC a friendly senator on an email that you send to yours if you're feeling like you're not getting heard.
And I think it also goes as well as, you may be getting discouraged because you're not getting the results that you feel like, but it's important to always have your voice, and you as a voter get the chance to share with them, and they're representing you.
And I think that League provides another bolstering space for that. So for some of our folks who are feeling discouraged, it is really reaffirming to get together with a group and talk about education policy and see that people are really excited. It doesn't feel quite as lonely and like you're banging your head against the wall on some particular issues. So that's another piece that I can't say enough good things about, is there is a value to doing this as a group. There is a value to finding other people, and there's a value to being there in person.
Absolutely. And I love the fact of when the groups get together and have conversation, because people are learning from each other too. You can go in and have an opinion, but we work through and talk through things because we're learning from those experts that are coming to us.
Absolutely.
Are there other action items that people can try to take to stay involved with the legislature? Kind of more specifically, we've talked a little bit about the League, and you've talked about the collaborative work that we have with our nonprofit organizations, but are there other ways that we can help stay informed to legislative work?
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind is get in touch with your own senator. Even though they're not in the building, they're still reachable. Their staff is still supporting them in the interim, so send an email, give a call. ask if you can go to coffee if there's something in particular you want to talk about. A lot of our senators also have newsletters, so if that feels like a little too much, which I can understand that might feel like a little too much initially, sign up for your legislator or even other legislators' newsletters, so they'll update you on the things that are going on and are important to them. Another really great tool that I want to highlight is the Unicameral update. So our legislative website has so much information. It can be tricky to navigate sometimes, but it is an incredible tool. And so that has a section that's Unicameral update. You can subscribe and it comes to your inbox and says, hey, here's what's happening. So that's another way. Again, it's going to be a little slower in the interim, but it is a good way to kind of keep your eye on what's going on. And if you just get really, you've binged your previous podcast and you're looking for something new, all of the recordings of legislative debate are online. So you can go back and listen, or hearings. So if this is new to you, maybe a good first step is find a bill you're interested in, use the legislative website, listen to that hearing, and kind of see if this is something that sparks your interest. And then, of course, join the league or email me or reach out and we'll get you connected.
Involved.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the media. I mean, the Nebraska Public Media, they stream a lot of the hearings.
All of them.
And, live, and which is great because if you can't be there in person or you just want to kind of stay informed, it's an opportunity to hear things right in person.
And there's a whole group of us listening.
So is there anything else that you'd like to share as we start to wrap up for today that we missed?
No, I really just appreciate the chance to, like I said, share the information in my head with folks who might be interested, and just encourage people that you don't have to have a background, you don't have to have done this forever. There's a way to take a step forward, and just to remember that in Nebraska, we are literally written into our government. So we have a responsibility to get involved. It's not only an opportunity.
And I think it's just a great reminder that everybody started with less information. So we all come together and we're always open to having people come and join us, whether a league event or event where you're listening in the hearings and some of the discussions. So there's a lot of great opportunities for people to get involved and engaged with league and the legislature. So thank you, Rachel, for speaking with us and joining our program today. For the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, I'm Jan McKenzie, reminding you to inform yourself about issues and candidates and be ready to go vote Omaha.